Hello and welcome to Matthew Reads, I guess. So, my signed album by Omega X, the TV show Last Twilight, this plush toy of Toad that I've had literally since I was 6, When Haru Was Here by Dustin Tao. You might be thinking, what do these 4 things have in common? The answer is that they are 4 of my favourite things. If you have not gathered, welcome to Matthew Reads, I guess. I am in fact talking about When Haru Was Here by Dustin Tao.
I guess I'll just...
You know, before I even recite the blurb or say anything else, I'm just gonna say, this is now my favourite book of all time. Like, me and the bestie.
What the fuck is Minecraft?
You know, to give you a timeline, like going off my Goodreads account, the last 2 books that I read, which were Prince of the Palisades and The Spells We Cast, they took me like roughly 2 weeks to read each, according to like my Goodreads account. But then like when I marked Prince of the Palisades as read, 4 days later I marked this as read. And I think I read it fully in like 3 sittings. Like I read for like half an hour for 2 nights, like after work 2 nights. And then I had a day off and then just read the entirety of the rest of the book in 1 day. You know, I am going to be honest, I have not read a book this quickly in a long time. And I'm very happy about that. But anyway, the blurb says that after the death of his best friend, Eric Lee creates an imaginary scenarios in his head to deal with his grief, until one of them becomes real and the boy that he met last summer, Haru Tanaka, walks into the coffee shop and sits down next to him. The only thing is that nobody else can see him. Eric suddenly has someone to connect with, making him feel less alone in the world, but as they spend more time together, he begins to question what is real and what isn't. Soon, Eric is losing control of the very thing that holds him together and must confront his reality, even if that means losing Haru forever. You know, I read that blurb on, like, the listing for this book, and I immediately just wanted to gnaw on my laptop, and I do mean that in a good way. Like, it's one of those things where I read the blurb and was like, I need to read this book immediately, and if I don't, I will become a problem. And you know, given that it is now my favourite book, my book bestie, my bookstie, if you will, shout out to my bookstie, hey bookstie!
What the fuck is Minecraft?
Like, I'm so glad I was right. Anyway, in the first chapter, Eric's sister Jasmine is moving away to university and his parents leave him alone for the night when, you know, they're gonna drive her to university. And then Eric's friend Daniel comes over, and then like an hour after they leave, you know, he tells Eric that there's a party that he wants Eric to go to, but Eric convinces Daniel to stay with him. Yeah, they mentioned that they have this upcoming school trip to Japan, and then the 2 of them end up kissing on Eric's roof and then just like never talk about it again. Yeah, the first 2 chapters of this book are in like a before section, which is before, spoiler alert, Daniel dies. He is the best friend that dies, that is mentioned in, you know, blurb fame. But anyway, the second chapter in like this before section, it is like the last day of the Japan trip and when he meets Haru. You know, the whole chapter with Haru, I cannot lie, it was so romantic. Like, the whole thing, I could just imagine seeing it like on screen. Like, I could watch it, I could see all the places they were despite not knowing what they looked like. And then by the end of the day, you know, they get separated on the train, and like Haru hides this piece of paper like for Eric that he was gonna give to Eric that had his phone number on it, but never gets to give it to him. And then in the 3rd chapter, that is when you find out that Daniel was dead. You know what, I'm not one for leaving frame because I don't have room, but just know if I could get up and leave the frame, why has it gone so dark? I would. Anyway, who's up for a fun lighting change? It got very dark for some reason. Oh well. Anyway, after those, you know, before chapters, we go to the after section, or like we go into the after section, and we see that things aren't very Gucci flip-flops anymore for Eric. You know, he started seeing things. Like, he's just started seeing things. See that he hasn't gone to university like he was originally planning to, and that he's just finished this like summer job with a catering company. But then like Jasmine comes to visit him to and like she tells him that she's dropped out of university and then is going to Amsterdam with a band. So like not only has Eric lost his best friend, but like now he's lost his sister as well. Like Mr. Man, poor Eric is going through it. And then like the one major sad thing in this book was that like, because the blurb explicitly said that Eric is basically making up seeing Haru, like I knew that the things he was seeing when Haru was here, everybody clap, thank you. I knew that they weren't real as much as I wanted them to be. You know, there was definitely a part of me that was like hoping by the end of the book that Haru would like mysteriously appear and that like they'd finally be able to exchange numbers and get back in contact with each other. And, you know, every time Eric saw Haru, like, I knew none of them were real, and every single bloody time it got my hopes up. But I will say one thing I did wonder was, like, how were things, like, perceived from someone else's perspective who isn't Eric? Like, when Eric was seeing Haru? Like, at one point, Eric gets his hand taken by Haru and they go off somewhere. But, like, how does that look to an average person on the street? Are they just seeing, like, Eric get dragged along walking weirdly? And, like, there's this moment where Eric stumbles and Haru catches him. Like, how is that being seen to the real world? So you also see, like, the issue of, like, Haru being the one that keeps Eric kind of sane. And obviously Eric wanting to be with Haru, but also Eric building like somewhat of a life for himself as he keeps himself going to figure out what's next in his life. Like Eric gets a job at the Chicago theatre and like makes a couple friends. And it's kind of the case of Eric doesn't know how to keep the two together, like his normal life and Haru, because obviously Eric is the only one who can see this like idealized version of Haru that he's made up. But also, during, like, Eric's time at the Chicago theatre, he ends up in, like, these situations that are absolutely wild that, like, I feel like you'd only see on TV, not, like, actually in real life. But, like, at the same time, I knew exactly what the people Eric was meeting had in mind for him. And it was like, we were watching Eric make all of these poor decisions that, like, you knew weren't going to end well for him. But, like, all you could do was, you know, feel bad for him. And you know, something that I was glad about in this book as well, that there were only a few chapters like in the before section. I did mention them earlier, there were like 2 right at the beginning. And I don't remember whether there was like more than one. I know there was definitely like 1 like in the book. Not me being the orangutan, in the book. You know, there was part of me that, like, when we went from the before sections to the after section, that, like, I did think we were gonna, like, keep hopping between the two. And to be honest, in a sense, I'm glad that we didn't, like, continuously hop between the two, because it meant we spent most of the time with Eric in the present, like, while he was basically going through it. You know, you see him obviously working at the Chicago theatre, and then you see like repeated mentions of him working on like college applications. And you know, seeing that, even though you knew that he was still like plagued, like even just seeing a quick mention of, you know, him saying that he's working on college applications, that meant that like he was trying, you know, that he wasn't just like letting himself wallow and then just be completely consumed by Haru being there. You know, I don't think it specifically was just, for me at least, it wasn't just the, like, college applications, because Eric loved film and, like, filmmaking as well, so I would have been content with even just, like, seeing him use the camera that he brought around with him, literally just, like, using it, like, he wouldn't have needed a goal. It was something just so that I could see that he wasn't just, you know, giving up, basically. Anyway, I feel like I'm kind of being really vague when I'm talking about this book, and to be honest, that is completely on purpose, because like when I wrote my notes for like this video, I did a lot of them while I was reading the book, and I got this book maybe like a week after it came out, and like this video when it comes out. This book, I'm still considering it new, so I'm not going to try and spoil anything. Also, I feel like this book is best experienced blind, so like me you know, mentioning anything that happened in the book, I feel like would be a disservice to any future readers. And something like, I did mention this in the last video that I made, that where like I'm actively trying to not think as much while I read. And when I say that, I don't mean just like not having no thoughts at all. I mean like trying to not be so smart and try and figure out everything, just like enjoying everything for what it is. Because I won't lie, this book made me feel a lot more than a book normally would. You know, I think in my life, there are only a handful of books that have made me cry. And to be honest, even to hand, I can only think of like the last Hunger Games book that made me cry. And now, this one as well. Yeah, so there was a fun video. Bitch, just read this book. There you go.